you, Mr. President. I finished off this speech after I put my baby to bed. My name is on her birth certificate, so is her father's, and together we have parental responsibility. The parent-child bond is uniquely special regardless of the formation of that family. On this International Women's Day, it seems appropriate that I can move this leave to introduce as a woman, as a mother, and as an LGBTQIA+ ally. To be absolutely clear, the policy work on this proposal has already been scoped out by a truly fantastic officer and others working for the ACGs with the Central Registry and on behalf of the Department of Health and Social Care and the Cabinet Office. My role here is, as a private member, looking to request Legislative Council approve leave for me to agree policy with the DHSC ahead of drafting for a bill that would otherwise take some years to appear in either branch, not due to it not being a priority, but due to resource. What I would seek to address is replicating a similar law that has been in place in England and Wales since 2008, 14 years ago. On the Isle of Man, the issue of same-sex parentage initially arose much later in 2014 due to a same-sex female couple who wished to register their child in both of their names as parents on their child's birth certificate, but weren't unable to. On the face of it, it seemed like a simple tweak to legislation concerning the registration of births. How wrong we all were, because the same-sex registration hangs on a broader and weightier issue of modern-day parentage, fertility, surrogacy law, and parental responsibility. The law says that parental responsibility is all of the rights, duties, powers, responsibilities, and authorities which by law a parent of a child has in relation to the child and the child's property. People with parental responsibility can make or be involved in the important decisions necessary in a child's life, including issues relating to where a child should live, their education and health, their name, religion, and whether they can travel or live abroad. Section 2 of the Children and Young Persons Act 2001 sets out what the rights of the parent are. It enables a person with parental responsibility to make important decisions on behalf of their child, like medical and educational decisions. A mother and father of a marital child automatically have parental responsibility. If they're unmarried, the father requires acquiring a parental responsibility if his name is added to the birth certificate via section 3, 1 and 2a. Therefore, in the Isle of Man, only a mother and father can register a child's birth, and this precludes same-sex parents. Currently, Part 9 of the CYPA 2001 holds the traditional definition of mother and father. As a consequence, one of the same-sex parents may be precluded from registering that child's birth and therefore adding it to the birth certificate. Manx law has not kept pace with the English and Welsh Human Fertilisation and Embryology Act 2008 of Parliament. Presently, female-female partners could become parents, but only the female that carried the child would be the mother. The second female parent wouldn't be the legal parent. The second female parent could, however, obtain parental responsibility. Male-male partners would need to use a surrogacy arrangement, but currently, to apply for a parental order and become the child's legal parents, only a heterosexual married couple can do that. Unmarried couples of whatever sex cannot apply for parental orders in surrogacy situations, and nor can single parents, which again doesn't take into account modern family life setups. There is also no provision to provide for the use of sperm or eggs in the event of a person's death. Under the new Adoption Act 2021, although it has royal assent, it hasn't been brought in yet, same-sex couples can adopt and therefore become legal parents. So there is a route to legal parenthood, but this is reliant on the implementation of that act, and it could prove tricky to do this in surrogacy situations. UK surrogacy law has its flaws, an area the Law Commission are now reviewing, making it a good time to tidy up this area of law. Added together, it's likely that a section 143 breach to the Equality Act 2017 to Part 11 and the public sector equality duty to promote equality, or it could be grounds for a section 20 breach in respect of indirect discrimination against someone on the basis of sexual orientation, or open to challenge to both. Additionally, at the moment, Regulation 8 of the Registration of Births and Deaths Regulations 2011 requires for particulars to be completed on Form 1. that requires a mother and a father to be entered onto that form. However, this is much more than an administrative box-ticking exercise. It speaks to the acceptance, recognition, and it speaks to legitimacy as well. It serves to an outward demonstration of our island's commitment to overcoming the wrongs and the hurts of the past and embracing next steps. It reflects changing, more progressive attitudes and takes us another step forward to mainstreaming equality into our everyday lives. Part of our roles as parliamentarians is to listen, a skill I'm learning to be more proficient at. We're always learning and educating ourselves, particularly on matters that affect our society and our community. So therefore, I will put a case forward, an appeal from a couple and their beautiful baby boy. I repeat Zoe's words verbatim. My wife and I married in 2018. So by the time our fertility treatment was successful and I gave birth to it in 2021, both of us, even though I carried our son, were legal parents with parental responsibility and thus should have been named on his birth certificate. This would have been the case in the UK, but not on the island. We were surprised that we couldn't both be listed as his parents. The team at the Central Registry was so nice, even apologetic about the fact that the legislation hadn't yet been changed. They found a way that a partner who can't be listed as an official parent can get their signature on a certificate as an informant, which we thought was thoughtful and kind. They spoke to us as though the new legislation would be close, and we have faith that that's true for same-sex couples who follow us. I've worked for the Manx government in the past, and I know how dedicated they are to making the island the best it can be, restrained obviously by long-established processes that they continually attempt to modify for our best interests. I understand these modifications take time, as they're rarely straightforward. I also watch how our sphere is becoming ever more diversified to the point that it's difficult to keep up, be inclusive, and it is good to be fair to all. I do not wish to push my choices in anyone's face, nor do I expect special treatment. I'm delighted, however, with the modernising of our daily life, which allows my wife and I to enjoy equal rights, applauding the Isle of Man for legislating same-sex marriage, and being able to live a lovely life here without prejudice. We went through years of IVF treatment to finally have our son, taking great pride in registering his birth. Naturally, we would have ideally wanted both of our names as parents on the birth certificate, but at present this isn't allowed. We had the most incredible service at no loss before, during and following the birth, with no discrimination at all. Indeed, we have experienced no negativity whatsoever on this island, and for this we're truly proud and grateful. I trust the change in this legislation is simply a matter of time, and we wish everyone involved the very best of luck. As a parliamentarian, it's perhaps fair to suggest that in 2022 providing parity for these same-sex parents is right because it's fair, equitable and reasonable. Registrar General Ed Clegg joined us in Legislative Council this morning, and he said the following, which again I will repeat to you. I welcome and support the Private Members Bill, which would update legislation to recognise conception and therefore parentage achieved by different means. Same-sex parents is the most obvious example. The consequence of the change is states' recognition of modern family structures and creating parental responsibility rights for same-sex parents. This is a long outstanding issue against which two previous Chief Ministers, Bell and Quayle, have made firm political commitments to progress, whereas requests to register same-sex parents are rare. The government risks ongoing criticism and embarrassment if the issue is not progressed. The registration of babies with same-sex parents has been permitted in the UK since 2009. You rightly recognise that this is not simply a civil registration issue. It goes to the core of what parentage is, legally and medically. Parents named on the birth certificate have parental responsibility of the child, the concepts and definitions of a parent being defined in the Children and Young Persons Act. Civil registration is the process whereby major vital life events are officially recorded. It's defined by the United Nations as the continuous, permanent, compulsory and universal recording of the occurrence and characteristics of vital events in a population in accordance with the legal requirements of the country. Our current system of civil registration, which does not recognise children from same-sex parents, results in the civil registry being unable to accurately record and provide evidence of their legal identity, civil status, and family relationships. Later this year, the island will begin to pardon men for historical convictions regarding homosexual acts, welcomed by Alan Shea, a hero of the Manx battle for gay rights. We've seen a beautiful rally of support for our first Isle of Pride festival. This area is overdue reform too. To those in our community and indeed this Honourable Council, I thank you for the opportunity to advocate for leave to introduce, and should this be supported, commit to listening in a pragmatic and constructive manner and to consult. The intention here is to create, with policy approval from the DHSC, a bill to amend Part 9 of the Children and Young Persons Act 2001 to make certain new provision in relation to fertilisation and surrogacy, and in particular to amend the meaning of mother and father so as to recognise that same-sex couples may wish to have children using modern fertilisation and embryology methods, to amend the Civil Registration Act 1984 to allow same-sex couples to register births and for connected purposes. In closing, I believe that we can all agree that we are active stakeholders in the island's future. In seeking this Honourable Council's leave to introduce, I hope that we'll take another step forward on the road to greater equality together.
Mrs. Masker.
Mr. President, I beg to second this important motion, and I do thank the mover for taking the initiative to bring this forward, not just for us but for the island as a whole. The mover has outlined that the Isle of Man law is well out of step, I'm afraid, and has fallen behind that of other jurisdictions, in spite of a considerable amount of work that's gone on between departments, across departments, and over a number of years. And so it will be important that we do refresh the view on this matter, and again, welcome consultation, as has been mentioned today. We need to take the temperature now, but I think it's important that it will give an ability also to right some wrongs, and also to complete work that should have been completed some time ago. For instance, in going into the information that's come forward in reading around this subject, it dawned on me that a heterosexual couple, even in today's law, unless the mother introduces the father at the time of registration, a father can be excluded from that registration, whether he likes it or not, unless he goes through the court process. So there is an anomaly there in our current law, and I think this will be important to bring out in part of the consultation that will go forward, hopefully. Also, as the mover said, a parent-child special relationship is one that's to be treasured, and again, it came as a surprise to me that there can be a recognition outside of this jurisdiction if somebody comes to live in the Isle of Man and the status of a child and the parents has been recognised in another jurisdiction, but coming to the Isle of Man, we are unable to recognise it. But then the anomaly is there that our own citizens and community don't have that equal recognition. So again, there is a potential to put that wrong right. And in this day of equality, the Equality Act 2017 aspired to really bring us into a modern age in terms of equality. And so as we go forward with this, I think, again, another really important opportunity for the Isle of Man to show that it actually means what it says when it pays lip service, as has been outlined by the mover again, to past administrations have actually given support, and even in the last administration 2020, the Minister for Health and Social Care indicated the support for this important piece of work and legislation. So I do wholeheartedly support this motion today that this matter should be taken forward, the consultation should go ahead, and we give our own community the opportunity to have equal rights in so many regards that are not there at present. And in doing so, I confirm my seconding of the motion, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mr. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'd just like to thank the Honourable Member for bringing this proposal before us today. Prior to joining the Department of Infrastructure, I was a member of the Department of Health and Social Care, and I'm well aware of the volume of new legislation and amendments to existing legislation which need moving. So I'm grateful to Ms August Hanson for her initiative, which above all else will allow both same-sex parents to register the birth of their own child. I'm just wondering, in her summing up, if the Honourable Member might make mention of same-sex foster parents and same-sex adoptive parents, and whether this will also cover that area. Just to conclude, I'm in full support of the Honourable Member's request of leave to introduce. Thank you.
Mr. Greenhill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd also like to thank the mover for bringing this very difficult subject forward, and I will fully support leave to introduce. Thank you.
Mr. President, I echo everything that's been said so far. Thank you very much for bringing this to the attention. I hadn't realised, I've gone through the law, it's quite shocking how out of date it appears in 2022, so I'll be fully supporting this motion.
Member to reply.
Thank you, and appreciate the support as well, and congratulate Mr Kelsey on her first speech so far in Legislative Council. I'd like to thank my seconder. It is out of step. It's entirely out of step, and yes, of course, consultation is incredibly important, because listening to the opinions of others, whether we agree with them or we don't agree with them, I think is incredibly important. And taking the temperature of the public in relation to this matter, I think, is also incredibly important. You're quite right in that the rights of the father are currently on our statute book at the moment not what they should be. It should be equal between the mother and the father in terms of the registration of the birth. The father would need to be, if not married or in a civil partnership, present at the registration of the birth and having signed that birth certificate before. It's not quite right at the moment as it sits. 2008, 14 years is a very, very long time. Sometimes something's prompted on the Isle of Man in order for us to take a look at a piece of legislation elsewhere. There's so much in our statute book that isn't necessarily what it should be. But the couple that came forward in 2014 and highlighted this as a real issue, to them, and I know who those individuals are, I'd just like to thank them for that. Because I think, since I had leave to introduce on this order paper, there have been 3 couples that have been in touch with me that have exactly this problem. I don't know how many others are out there. I would like to know how many others are out there. But at present, who knows? They're not necessarily, some people are not necessarily active about coming forward, and I respect that. The Equality Act, I think, has really changed the landscape on the Isle of Man for more than just same-sex couples or the LGBTQIA plus community. It's changed an awful lot. It's modernised us, it's moved us forward slightly, and it's not necessarily the perfect piece of legislation written in the perfect way, but it's done a great deal of good. As has, in promoting it, the previous member of Legislative Council, Jane Paul Wilson, who was MLC at the time, and also the Equality Advisor as well, Dawn Kinnish, who was originally the person that put this forward as an issue that needed to be addressed. So I thank my seconder for raising those points. In terms of the same-sex and foster and adoptive registration, I've said during my speech, but I'll say that the Adoption Act, although it has royal assent, it's not yet been brought in, as you'll know, having been at DHSC and still taking an interest in all of that area. Same-sex couples can adopt in that, and they can become legal parents, so there is that route. But it's the surrogacy situations that are the issue there, and so that needs to be addressed, and that will be addressed by this in a much broader fashion. And we look at sort of right the way across the piece, as opposed to just the registration of same-sex couples in the formal way, in the normal way. I would like to thank Peter Greenhill for his support. I would also like to thank yourself as well, Mrs. Kelsey, for your support, and again, congratulate you on your maiden speech. But thank you, Mr. President. We'll leave it at that. Back to you.
So, honourable members, the motion as laid before you is the item 1, leave the need to introduce motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. The ayes have it, Therefore, motion carried, and congratulate Ms. August Hanson and wish her well on her journey.